Today, let's talk about the counseling skill of immediacy. Immediacy is a counseling skill that involves addressing what is happening in the present moment in the session between the counselor and the client. The skill of immediacy focuses on the here and now experience, including the client's feelings, the counselor's reactions, and the dynamic within the therapeutic relationship. There are a couple of different purposes to the counseling skill of immediacy. One purpose is to increase self awareness and insight. Sometimes the here and now and what's going on within the session, certain client behaviors or responses, it's important to point those out in the moment because the client may not even realize that they're reacting or responding in that way. So, when we use the skill of immediacy to point out what's going on in the here and now, it might help the client to gain some insight or awareness around their own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Another purpose of the skill of immediacy is to address any tension, resistance, or misunderstandings within the session. Maybe as the counselor, you notice that the mood has shifted once you've brought up a new topic. And all of a sudden, you've noticed that the client is much less likely to share, much less willing to share. And you're noticing that there's a tension now within the session, within the relationship. We can use that skill of immediacy to bring that tension to the here and now and to talk about it, to air it out, and to make sure that we're not misunderstanding our client. Another purpose of the skill of immediacy is to strengthen the therapeutic relationship by fostering openness and authenticity. When a therapist points out or notices something that's going on in the here and now and then brings that to the attention of the client, what that communicates to the client is that I see you. I see that there's been a shift. I see that there's been a change. I'm noticing your responses and reactions. Instead of acting like they don't exist, instead I'm going to bring them to the here and now so that we can talk through it. Another purpose of the skill of immediacy is to model healthy communication and emotional expression. Here's an example of what the counseling skill of immediacy might look like in practice. Let's say that you're working with a client and you've been working with them for quite some time. And so you know kind of the patterns of emotional responses and behaviors that the client typically exhibits within session. And you notice this client is typically very participatory, very positive, and even when they are experiencing something distressing, they usually can bring themselves back and they're flexible and can kind of work through the issues. However, you notice that there's been a change in behavior. Every time you bring up the client's mother, you notice that the client is much more closed off and maybe unwilling to share. You also notice a change in body language where this client starts to cross their arms and often will try to change the topics of conversation to be something that's anything other than talking about the client's mother. In this example, we could use the skill of immediacy. It might look something like this. Joan, I notice that every time we bring up your mother, there seems to be a change in demeanor. I notice that when we bring up your mom, you usually quickly try to change the topic of conversation. And I also notice that sometimes when I bring her up, there's a change in body language where I see you kind of lean back in your chair and cross your arms and really seem to be a little bit more disengaged. Can we talk about what's going on here? So this is an example of immediacy. I'm bringing what's going on in the present moment in the here and now in session to the attention of the client and then having a conversation about it. The use of immediacy helps the client become aware of their in the moment reactions and it opens the door for deeper exploration. So thanks for joining me today to talk about the counseling skill of immediacy. I'll see you next time on Therapist Things with Dr. King.